Honestly, Mom, no one cares. My son Mark said, his voice sharp with the impatience of a realtor on a tight schedule. He gestured at the carefully cataloged mineral samples that lined the shelves of my basement, my life's work. We need to clear out this junk to stage the house. His sister, Chloe, nodded, scrolling through her phone. He's right. It's just clutter. Mark picked up a heavy, crystalline piece of neodymium ore, a sample I'd risked a flash flood in the Dakota Badlands to recover 40 years ago. He weighed it in his hand, his expression flat and dismissive. They're just a bunch of old rocks. Just rocks. My entire career, the woman I used to be, reduced to garbage. But that cold, casual dismissal wasn't the reason they lost everything. It was just the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for years. The earthquake that finally brought the walls down arrived on a Tuesday, in a crisp, cream-colored envelope from the bank. It wasn't a flimsy bill or a piece of junk mail, it had weight. The paper was thick, the bank's logo embossed in the corner. I sat at my kitchen table, the one my husband and I bought at a garage sale 40 years ago, and refinished ourselves, and slid it open with a butter knife. My coffee, my one morning ritual, grew cold in its mug beside me. The words were cold, sterile, and utterly brutal. Final notice. Balloon payment due. I read the sentence 3 times, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. They weren't. $50,000. The number seemed to float off the page, a ghost in my quiet kitchen. $50,000, due in 30 days. 30, an impossibly short finish line for a marathon of debt. And right below it, the final terrifying word, foreclosure. My breath caught in my chest. This house. This wasn't just wood and nails to me. It was the only place my children had ever called home. It was the walls that held the echoes of their laughter, the faint pencil marks on the doorframe measuring their growth, the garden where my husband planted the rose bushes for our 10th anniversary. It was the last, most tangible piece of him I had left. And it was all tied to a home equity loan I had taken out a decade ago, not for a new car or a fancy vacation. For them. I remembered Mark's face, slick with the sweat of a salesman's ambition, as he laid out the plans for his boutique real estate firm. It's a can't-miss investment, Mom, he'd promised. I just need the seed money to get the office off the ground. I'll pay you back double in 5 years. The business folded in 18 months, and the loan was never mentioned again. Then there was Chloe, a few years later, calling me in a flood of tears about emergency medical bills and a looming collections agent. I didn't hesitate. I drew the rest of the equity out of the house to cover it, only to see photos on her Instagram a week later of a rejuvenation trip to a high-end cosmetic dermatologist in Scottsdale. When I gently asked, she'd waved it away. It's for my wellness brand, Mom. You have to project success to attract success. You wouldn't understand. I understood now. I understood perfectly. I had been their personal bank, their bottomless ATM, the safety net they never had to worry about, and now the net had broken. For a fleeting second, I thought about calling them. The thought died before it could fully form. I could play the entire conversation out in my head like a tired old movie. Mark would sigh, a long, put-upon sound, and immediately pivot to the market value of the house. Look, Mom, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. We can get a great price for it. You can downsize, get a condo. It makes financial sense. Chloe would be worse. She would turn it into a lecture on my irresponsible financial planning and how I should have been monetizing my assets for years. They wouldn't see a mother losing her home. They would see a logistical problem, an asset to be liquidated, an inconvenience standing between them and their next commission, their next wellness retreat. They wouldn't offer to help. They would offer solutions that help them. I looked at my hands, resting on the cold Formica tabletop. The skin was thin, the knuckles a little swollen, but they were still strong. These hands had once chipped away at rock formations under a blistering Dakota sun, searching for the earth's secrets. They had held my husband, they had raised my children, and they had signed the papers that put everything I had on the line for them. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the hour, each tick a second falling away from my 30-day deadline. The bank had given me a month. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my children would give me nothing. It was on me. It had always been on me. That night, sleep was a stranger. The numbers on the bank letter seemed to be burned onto the inside of my eyelids. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up, pulling on my old soft robe and making my way down the creaking stairs to the basement. My children called it a junk room, but it was my sanctuary. It was the one place in the house that was completely mine, a museum of a life I'd lived before them. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and old paper. The shelves weren't filled with old Christmas decorations or broken appliances. They were lined with hundreds of wooden trays, each one holding dozens of mineral samples, neatly cataloged with a small, handwritten label. Pyrite that glittered like fool's gold, deep purple amethyst geodes, veins of turquoise snaking through raw stone. My life, categorized and put on a shelf. I walked to the far corner, to a heavy olive-drab footlocker that sat under the basement window like a sleeping beast. It wasn't just a box, it was a time capsule. I knelt and unlatched the heavy brass clasps. The lid opened with a low groan, releasing the scent of dust and dry earth, a smell that transported me instantly. Inside, nestled in yellowed cotton batting, were the prize specimens, the rocks too precious, too full of memory, for the open shelves. My fingers brushed over a piece of quartz, its facets cool and sharp, and landed on a small, worn photo album tucked in the corner. I pulled it out and opened it. The first picture was of a young woman, no older than 25, squinting into a brilliant, wide-open sky. Her face was tanned, her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing dusty field gear. She was leaning against the tailgate of an old Jeep, a geological hammer in her hand, and she was grinning, a full, confident, unapologetic grin. It was me. But it felt like looking at a stranger, a woman from a different lifetime. I closed my eyes, and the dusty chill of the basement dissolved into the searing, dry heat of the Dakota Badlands. It was 40 years ago. The sun was relentless, beating down on a vast, cracked landscape of striped rock and ancient dust. I was a doctoral candidate on my first major geological survey, and I felt more at home there, under that endless sky, than I ever had in a classroom. I remembered the moment perfectly. The lead geologist, a grizzled veteran named Dr. Albright, had called it a day. The rest of the team was packing up, tired and covered in grime. But I had a feeling, a hum under my skin. I'd seen a stratum of rock, a subtle discoloration that everyone else had walked right past. "Just 5 more minutes, Arthur," I'd pleaded. He'd sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Reed, it's 105 degrees. We've been out here for 10 hours. But he saw the look in my eyes. He knew. I took my hammer and walked over to the outcrop. I ran my hand over the rock, feeling for a fracture line, a weakness. I could feel the story of the stone through my fingertips, the immense pressure, the volcanic heat, the slow creep of time. Then, I swung. The hammer hit the rock with a sharp crack that echoed in the vast silence. It split open perfectly, and inside, nestled in the dull gray stone, was a vein of something I had never seen before. It wasn't shiny or beautiful. It was a dense, silvery gray mineral with a strange, subtle violet sheen. I knew with the certainty of a scientist and the thrill of an explorer that it was important. Dr. Albright came over, his skepticism melting away as he looked at what I was holding. He took the sample, his eyes wide. He looked from the rock back to my face, and a slow, respectful smile spread across his lips. "You have a gift, Ev," he said, his voice a low rumble of awe. "You can see what no one else can." The memory faded, and I was back in the cold basement, a 6-8-year-old woman kneeling on a concrete floor. The vibrant, sun-drenched girl in the photograph felt like a ghost. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the promising young geologist with a gift, had disappeared a long time ago. She disappeared the year my husband, a brilliant architect with a bad heart, collapsed on a job site and never came home. She disappeared when I found myself a 2 8-year-old widow with a toddler, Mark, and a baby on the way. The grants, the field research, the tenure track, they all evaporated, replaced by the crushing, immediate reality of mortgages and diapers and PTA meetings. My life's work was packed away into trays and footlockers, relegated to the basement, a silent testament to a path not taken. The old rocks weren't just my past, they were my future. A future I had sacrificed, piece by piece, for my children. I gently closed the photo album and placed it back in the chest. I looked around the quiet room, at the carefully curated evidence of a life I had abandoned, and a cold, hard thought took root in my mind. I had given up my entire world for them. The very least they could do was not take my house, too. So, with the bank's letter lying on the table like a death sentence, I did what I hadn't done in years. I asked for help. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling slightly, and called Mark first. He answered on the second ring, his voice a smooth, professional purr. "Evelyn Reed's office," Mark speaking. He always called me by my full name when he was in real estate mode, as if I were a client, not the woman who taught him how to ride a bike. "Mark, it's me," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "I need to talk to you about the house." "Mom! Perfect timing," he said, his voice instantly shifting into a higher gear. "I was just running the comps in your neighborhood. The market is white hot. If we get the place staged properly, clear out some of the clutter, a fresh coat of paint, we could have it listed by the first of the month. I'm telling you, we'll have a bidding war on our hands." He was already selling my home out from under me. I took a deep breath. "Mark, listen to me. It's not about selling. The bank, they're going to foreclose." The slick, salesman's patter stopped. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, but it wasn't the silence of shock or concern. It was the silence of a man doing rapid, angry calculations. "What?" he finally said, his voice dropping its friendly tone. "Foreclose? Mom, that's a disaster. That's a public record. It'll kill the property value. The timing is terrible." "The timing is 30 days," I said, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "They need $50,000. I heard him sigh, a long, drawn-out sound of pure annoyance. 50? Jesus. "Look, Mom, I'm one big sale away from making President's Club this year. One sale. It means a 6-figure bonus and the lease on the new Tesla. We cannot have a foreclosure on the books right now. It makes me look like I can't manage my own family's assets." He wasn't worried about me. He wasn't worried about his childhood home. He was worried about his image, about a car. I thought you should know," I said quietly. "Yeah, okay," he said, his voice already distant, preoccupied. "Let me look into some options. Run the numbers. Maybe we can get a bridge loan or something. I'll get back to you." He hung up. "No, I love you." "No, are you okay?" Just the click of a disconnected line, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigerator. My hands were shaking now, a fine tremor of rage and disbelief. I stared at the phone for a long time before dialing Chloe's number. Maybe she would be different. She answered with a breathless, "Mom, hey, I can't really talk. I'm in the middle of a team vision boarding session. We're manifesting our Q4 goals. Chloe, honey, I need you. It's an emergency." I heard her sigh, a dramatic, put-upon sound that was a mirror image of her brother's. "Okay, but make it quick. What's wrong?" I explained it all again. The letter, the 30 days, the $50,000, the foreclosure. Her response was somehow even worse than Mark's. "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with a kind of pitying wellness jargon. "That is such negative energy. You're manifesting scarcity. We talked about this. You have to adopt an abundance mindset." "Chloe, this isn't about a mindset. This is about the bank taking my house." I know, but you're focusing on the problem, not the solution," she said, her voice full of the false confidence of a pyramid scheme evangelist. "Look, my finances are all tied up right now. I have to fund this team-building wellness retreat to Bali for my top sellers. It's a huge investment in my downline, and it's absolutely crucial for my brand. I can't have this kind of financial stress right now. It's blocking my flow." I was speechless. A trip to Bali. Her flow. "But don't worry," she continued, her tone brightening. "I can help. I'm going to overnight you a bottle of my Abundance Essential Oil Blend. You just need to rub it on your pulse points and repeat the mantra, 'I am a magnet for prosperity.' It will help you shift your mindset and attract the solution." I closed my eyes. A bottle of snake oil. That was her answer to me losing everything. "I have to go, Mom. My team needs me," she said, her voice already moving away from the phone. "Just try to be positive. You'll figure it out." She hung up. I placed my phone down on the table. The small clink of plastic on Formica was the only sound in the room. It was the only protest I had left. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen, the morning sun casting long shadows across the floor, and I finally understood. I was not a person to them. I was not their mother. I was an obstacle. An inconvenient, financially messy problem standing in the way of a new car and a trip to Bali. The next few days were filled with a strange, suffocating silence. Neither of them called me back. Not to check in, not to offer a solution, not even to pretend to care. The cream-colored envelope from the bank sat on my kitchen counter, a silent monument to their indifference. I tried to go about my days. I weeded the rose garden my husband had planted, my hands moving automatically, pulling at the stubborn roots of dandelions. The work was familiar, grounding. The sun was warm on my back, and for a few minutes at a time, I could almost forget the ticking clock. It was on a Saturday afternoon, while I was pruning the deadheads off the roses, that I heard their voices. They were coming from the garage. The side door was propped open for ventilation, and their words carried clearly across the small patch of lawn. I froze, my pruning shears hovering over a spent bloom. "I'm telling you, this has to be it," Mark was saying, his voice a low, excited murmur. "Look at the letterhead. University of California Department of Geology." I put the shears down in my gardening basket and quietly moved closer, staying behind the thick hedge of forsythia that separated the garden from the driveway. I wasn't trying to spy, but I knew, with a mother's instinct, that this conversation was not for my ears, and therefore, I had to hear it. "What does it say?" Chloe asked, her voice sharp with impatience. "It's from an old professor of hers, dated 1985, Mark said. "He's thanking her for letting him analyze some of her field samples. Listen to this. Your initial findings on the neodymium samples from the Dakota Badlands are particularly promising, Evelyn. The potential concentration is remarkable. I strongly urge you to pursue this line of research." There was a pause. I held my breath. That letter. I remembered it. It had arrived just after my husband's funeral. A ghost from a life that was no longer possible. Neodymium. Chloe sounded out the word like it was a difficult yoga pose. "What the hell is that?" "I Googled it," Mark said, a smug tone in his voice. "It's a rare earth element, used in high-strength magnets, for everything from electric cars to wind turbines to iPhones. It's valuable." "Valuable like? How valuable?" Chloe asked, her voice suddenly much more interested. "That's the problem. The letter just says it's promising. It's just raw ore, not a finished product," Mark said. "But look, I made a call. There's a guy, deals in precious metals, estate liquidations, that kind of thing. He knows about this stuff. I have him on the phone right now." I heard the distinct, tinny sound of a speakerphone. A gruff, gravelly voice filled the air. "Yeah, I'm here. So what have you got?" "Hi, Tony," Mark said, his voice shifting back into its smooth salesman mode. "So, like I said, my mother was a geologist. She has this huge collection of rocks in the basement. One of them is this neodymium stuff. We have a letter from a university saying it's promising. What's a collection like that worth?" The voice on the phone let out a dismissive laugh. "Kid, a promising rock is like a promising lottery ticket. It's worth nothing until it's worth something. You got it assayed, refined?" "No, it's just rocks in a box," Chloe chimed in. "Look," the appraiser sighed, his patience clearly wearing thin. "It's just raw ore. To the right person, a university or some tech company, maybe it's worth something down the line. To me, it's a gamble. I gotta pay someone to analyze it, find a buyer. It's a headache. Tell you what, for the whole collection, the whole box of rocks, I'll give you $5,000. Cash. Take it or leave it. $5,000. For a lifetime." A thorn from one of the rose bushes pricked my thumb, a sharp, sudden sting. I barely felt it. "Done," Mark said instantly, without a moment's hesitation. "It's better than nothing. We can get it to you on Monday." "Perfect," Chloe said, and her voice was bright, relieved, almost cheerful. The sound of it was more painful than the prick of the thorn. "That covers my plane ticket to Bali, and honestly, she'll never even notice they're gone." Then came the final killing blow. "To her," Chloe added with a light, dismissive laugh, "they're just memories." The world went silent. The buzzing of the bees in the roses, the distant hum of traffic, my own breathing, it all faded away. There was only the echo of those words. They're just memories. She had taken the most sacred part of me, the last remnant of the woman I was meant to be, and valued it at the price of a plane ticket. I looked down at my hand. A single perfect drop of blood was welling up from my thumb, a tiny red star against my skin. I hadn't just been a mother to them. I had been a resource, a mine, and they had just stripped the last, most precious ore and sold it for pennies on the dollar. They thought they were selling my past. They had no idea they had just sold their own future. That night, after their car pulled away, I didn't cry. The time for tears was over, a long-ago season that had yielded nothing. The hurt had burned away, leaving behind a cold, clear, and unshakable purpose. The woman who had spent 40 years being a mother, a soft place to land, a lender of last resort, was gone. In her place, Dr. Evelyn Reed was beginning to stir. I walked through the quiet house, my footsteps echoing in the silence they had left behind. I didn't go to the basement, to my sanctuary of memories. I went to the garage. The garage was my husband's domain, and after he died, it became a kind of mausoleum, a place for lawnmowers, old paint cans, and forgotten things. But in the far corner, under a heavy, gray, dust-laden canvas cover, was the one thing that was truly mine. My hands didn't shake as I pulled the cover off. The dust flew up in a thick cloud, dancing in the single bare light bulb overhead. And there it sat. My old Jeep Wrangler, the same one from the photograph. Its forest green paint was faded, its tires were flat, but it had the rugged, timeless look of something built to endure. My children saw it as a relic, another piece of junk to be hauled away. I saw it as a promise I had made to myself a long, long time ago. I opened the passenger door. The hinges let out a low groan of protest. The air inside was stale, smelling of old vinyl and adventure. I reached under the passenger seat, my fingers finding the familiar worn leather strap of the hidden compartment I had built myself 30 years ago. I gave it a sharp tug. A panel popped open, revealing a space that was not dusty or forgotten. It was clean, and it was ready. Inside was my contingency plan, my go bag. It wasn't a bag, really. It was a small, waterproof Pelican case. I lifted it out and placed it on the seat. I opened the clasps. Inside, everything was in its place. There was a satellite phone, its battery indicator showing a full charge. There were laminated geological survey maps of Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, creased and worn along the folds I knew by heart. And at the bottom, there were 3 thick, sealed envelopes. I opened the first one. It was filled with $100 bills. $10,000. I remembered when I had started this secret fund. It was the day Mark's can't-miss real estate business officially went bankrupt, taking my $25,000 with it. That day, I'd gone to the bank, opened a new account he didn't know about, and deposited the first $200. Every time they disappointed me, every time a birthday was forgotten, every time a call went unreturned, I'd added to it. Chloe's medical emergency had paid for the satellite phone. Their indifference had paid for my freedom. This wasn't an escape born of a single insult. It was a lifeboat, built piece by piece over a decade of slow, sinking disillusionment. I had hoped I would never have to use it, but hope, I now knew, was a luxury I could no longer afford. I closed the case and slid it back into its hidden home. I went to the old metal cabinet against the wall and found the tire pump. As I filled each tire, the hiss of the air was the only sound, a slow reinflation of my own dormant life. When the tires were firm, I popped the hood. The engine was dusty but clean. I unscrewed the oil cap and checked the dipstick. The oil was clear, golden. I had changed it myself 6 months ago, just in case. I had always been prepared. I closed the hood with a soft, definitive click. I ran my hand along the dusty fender, a gesture of an old soldier greeting a trusted partner before a final battle. My children were coming on Monday to sell a box of my memories for pennies on the dollar. They had no idea I was about to take back the whole mountain. I left before dawn. There's a certain kind of magic in the hour before the sun rises, a stillness where the world seems to be holding its breath. That was the time I chose. I didn't turn on the house lights. I moved through the familiar shadows of my home by memory, a ghost in my own life. I packed only one thing from the house, the heavy olive drab footlocker from the basement. It took all my strength to drag it up the stairs and load it into the back of the Jeep. The effort made my muscles burn and my heart pound, But it was a good pain. It was the pain of reclamation. Every rock, every crystal, every fossil inside was a piece of the woman I'd been forced to bury, and I wasn't leaving a single piece of her behind. I didn't pack a photograph. I didn't take a single sentimental trinket from the mantelpiece. The house, I realized, was already a memory, a place I had once lived. The future was waiting in the back of my Jeep. On the kitchen table, in the very spot where the bank's final notice had sat, I placed my own. It was a single sheet of notepaper, folded in half. My message was short, written in the neat block letters of a geologist labeling a field sample. I didn't pour my heart out. I didn't list my grievances. I gave them exactly the same amount of consideration they had given me. The note read, "Needed to clear my head. Gone to Nevada to do some surveying. Don't wait up, Mom." I took one last look around the quiet kitchen, then walked out the back door, leaving it unlocked. I didn't need the key anymore. The old Jeep started on the first try, its engine rumbling to life with a low, satisfying growl. I backed out of the driveway slowly, my headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. As I turned onto the main road, the first pale fingers of sunrise were beginning to stretch across the eastern sky. I didn't look back. I just pressed my foot on the gas and drove west. They arrived around 10 o'clock, just as I knew they would. Mark's sleek silver sedan pulled into the driveway, followed by Chloe's white SUV with a ridiculous vinyl decal on the back window that read, "Manifesting My Empire." They walked in through the back door without knocking, their voices filling the quiet house. "Mom? You here?" Mark called out, his tone already impatient. He tossed his car keys onto the clean kitchen counter with a loud clatter. "Her car is gone," Chloe said, peering out the window. "Where would she even go at this hour?" She opened my refrigerator, scanned the contents with a critical eye, and closed it with a dissatisfied click. They saw the note at the same time. Mark picked it up, read it, and snorted. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, handing it to Chloe. "Gone surveying. What is she, 70? Who goes surveying?" Chloe read the note, her perfectly shaped eyebrows knitting together in annoyance. "Nevada? Seriously? Does she think this is some kind of movie? We have a buyer coming for those rocks on Monday." This is so typical of her, being dramatic and inconvenient. "It doesn't matter," Mark said, already dismissing it. "She's probably just gone to a state park for the day to feel sorry for herself. The important thing is the footlocker. Let's get it out of the basement and into my trunk before she gets back and changes her mind." "Good idea," Chloe agreed. "The sooner we get that $5,000, the sooner I can book my flight. The Bali retreat is almost sold out." They weren't worried. They weren't concerned for my safety. My sudden, unannounced departure to another state was just a minor, irritating delay in their business transaction. They walked out of the kitchen and headed for the basement stairs, their footsteps confident and purposeful, the sound echoing in the empty house. They were like vultures, circling what they thought was a sure thing, completely unaware that the feast had already gotten up and walked away. I can picture them so clearly. The confident clatter of their shoes on the old wooden basement stairs. The air would have been cool and still, smelling of damp concrete and 40 years of stored memories. A single, bare light bulb, the one I was always meaning to replace, would have cast long, distorted shadows from the shelves, making the familiar space seem a little sinister. "God, it's a crypt down here," Chloe would have said, pulling her thin cardigan tighter around her shoulders, her nose wrinkling at the smell. "Just grab the box and let's go," Mark would have replied, his voice echoing slightly in the small space. "Tony the appraiser is meeting me on Monday, and I don't want any last-minute drama." They would have walked over to the far corner, to the spot under the grimy window where the old footlocker always sat. To them, it was just another piece of my clutter, a heavy, inconvenient object standing between them and $5,000. I imagine Mark rapping his knuckles on the lid. "This is it," he'd say. "Heavy old thing. You're helping me carry it up, by the way. I'm not throwing my back out for your Bali trip." "Fine, whatever," Chloe would snap back. "Just open it. Let's make sure the weird purple rocks are actually in there." And that would be the moment. The turning point. Mark, with a little grunt of effort, would kneel and flip the heavy brass latches. They would spring open with a loud clack that would break the basement's silence. He would take a corner of the lid, Chloe taking the other, and together they would lift. The lid would groan open, revealing the contents. Or rather, the lack of them. I can see the look on their faces, illuminated by that single dim bulb. First, confusion, a blank, uncomprehending stare into the empty, dusty interior of the box. The yellowed cotton batting I'd used for padding would be there, flattened and sad, but nothing else. No rocks, no crystals, no promising neodymium samples, just a hollow, empty space. What the hell? Mark would be the first to speak, his voice a low, baffled whisper. Where is it? Chloe would peer inside, as if a different angle might magically reveal the missing collection. Is there a false bottom or something? Did she move them? She'd start patting the bottom of the footlocker frantically, her manicured nails scraping against the old wood. They have to be here. Obviously they're not here, Chloe. Mark's voice would start to rise, the smooth salesman's confidence cracking to reveal the panic underneath. Did you see any other boxes? Anything that looked like this? They would have started searching then, a desperate, clumsy scramble through my carefully ordered sanctuary, tossing aside old photo albums, knocking over stacks of geological journals. The quiet, peaceful museum of my life would be ransacked in minutes by their greed-fueled panic. They'd look on the shelves, behind the furnace, inside old paint cans, their movements getting faster, more frantic, as the cold, simple truth began to dawn on them. It was Chloe who would have connected the dots first. I can hear the sound of her sharp, indrawn breath as she stopped dead in the middle of the basement. "The note," she'd whisper, her voice suddenly small and shaky. "Mark, the note." He would stop his frantic search and turn to look at her, his face flushed and angry. "What about the note?" "She went to Nevada. And her car is gone." Chloe would continue, the pieces clicking into place in her mind, forming a picture she did not want to see. "And the rocks are gone." They would just stand there for a long moment, in the middle of the mess they'd made, under the light of that single, bare bulb. The silence would stretch, filled only by the low hum of the furnace. The easy money, the Tesla down payment, the plane ticket to Bali, all of it had vanished. It had gotten into an old green Jeep and driven west before the sun came up, leaving nothing behind but an empty box and the chilling realization that their mother was not nearly as predictable or as helpless as they had always believed. The panic set in almost immediately. It was a frantic, ugly thing. They stormed up from the basement, leaving the empty footlocker gaping like a tomb, and descended on the kitchen. The house that had been a silent stage for their conspiracy was now filled with the shrill, panic sound of their voices. "He's not picking up!" Chloe shrieked, her thumb furiously redialing a number on her smartphone. "I've called him 6 times. Mark was pacing the worn linoleum floor, a caged animal in his expensive loafers. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time all day. "Of course he's not picking up. It was a cash deal, Chloe. A shady, back-alley transaction for a quick buck. He probably thinks we're trying to pull something." "Well, do something," she snapped, throwing her phone down on the counter with a loud crack. "Call someone else. You're the big-shot real estate agent. You must know people who buy weird, old rocks." "It doesn't work like that," he shot back, his voice rising to match hers. "This isn't a 3-bedroom colonial. This was a one-shot deal with a guy who doesn't ask questions. And now the merchandise is gone. This is your fault," she accused, her finger jabbing in his direction. "You were the one who was supposed to have this all handled. You were the one who said it would be easy." "My fault," he scoffed, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping his lips. "You're the one who couldn't wait to book your ridiculous Bali vacation. If you hadn't been so greedy, we could have taken our time, maybe found a legitimate buyer." They stood there, in the quiet, sunlit kitchen of the house they were so eager to sell, their ugly, selfish ambitions laid bare and turning them against each other. Their grand plan, their $5,000 solution, had evaporated into thin air, leaving nothing but the sour taste of their own greed. While my children were frantically trying to salvage a deal built on deceit, I was hundreds of miles away, in a world they couldn't even imagine. I was sitting in a cool, quiet laboratory at the University of Nevada's geology department. The only sounds were the low, steady hum of advanced equipment and the soft clicking of a keyboard. The air smelled of clean electricity and ozone. Across a stainless steel table from me sat a young woman, Dr. Anya Sharma. She couldn't have been much older than Chloe, with bright, intelligent eyes and a crisp, white lab coat. She had treated me with a deference and respect my own children hadn't shown me in 20 years, calling me Dr. Reed and handling my mineral samples with the gentle care of a museum curator. The prize of my collection, the large, heavy piece of neodymium ore from the Dakota Badlands, was gone. It was inside a massive, humming machine called a mass spectrometer. For the past 2 hours, it had been analyzing the sample, breaking it down to its elemental signature. "The initial readings are coming through now," Dr. Sharma said, her voice a low, professional murmur as she pointed to a complex graph beginning to form on a large computer monitor. I leaned forward. I hadn't seen a spectral analysis graph in decades, but it was a language I had never forgotten. I watched as the lines spiked, climbing higher and higher on the screen, far beyond the normal parameters. "Doctor." Sharma went silent. She stopped typing. She just stared at the screen, her professional composure slowly melting away, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. She pushed her glasses up on her nose and leaned so close to the monitor her breath fogged the glass. She turned to look at me, her young face a mask of disbelief and wonder. The hum of the machinery seemed to grow louder in the sudden tense silence. "Dr. Reed," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The concentration levels, I've recalibrated twice. The system must be making a mistake." She pointed a trembling finger at a number on the screen. "This is impossible. We have never ever seen a raw sample this pure. This isn't just a promising find." She shook her head, laughing a little, a sound of pure scientific shock. "This," she said, her voice filled with a reverence my own children had never known, "is the mother lode." The 30 days passed. For me, they were a whirlwind of meetings with university lawyers, patent attorneys, and mineral rights experts. The dusty footlocker from my basement was now the subject of non-disclosure agreements and 7-figure preliminary offers. The woman my children had written off as a liability was, it turned out, an extremely valuable asset. For them, those 30 days were filled with a different kind of activity, a frantic, spiraling panic. They left dozens of voicemails. At first they were angry and demanding, then pleading, then finally terrified. They had tried to report me as a missing person, only to be told by a bored-sounding police officer that a 6-8-year-old woman with a valid driver's license and no signs of cognitive decline had every right to go on a road trip. They were trapped. The deadline on the bank letter loomed, a black hole threatening to swallow their future. Their quick $5,000 payday had vanished, and with it, any hope of a simple solution. The final day arrived. Mark was sitting in his glass-walled office, the picture of modern success. Chrome and leather, a panoramic view of the city, an expensive espresso machine humming in the corner. He was staring at a brochure for the new Tesla, the car that was supposed to be the prize for making the President's Club, the symbol that he had finally arrived. But his big sale, the one he was counting on, had fallen through last week. His quota was missed. There would be no bonus. And now, the foreclosure would become a public record, a permanent stain on the pristine image of Mark Reed, real estate rock star. His desk phone rang, a polite electronic chirp. He glanced at the caller ID. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but a knot of dread in his stomach made him pick it up. "Mark Reed," he said, his voice clipped and professional. There was no person on the other end, only a cold, synthesized robotic voice, a voice devoid of pity or negotiation. "This is a legal notification for Mark Reed. The grace period for the balloon payment on the property at 123 Oak Street has expired as of 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The property has officially entered foreclosure proceedings. All assets will be seized and liquidated by the bank. There is no further recourse. Thank you for your attention." The line went dead. Mark didn't move. He just sat there, the phone receiver still pressed to his ear, listening to the dial tone. He looked at the Tesla brochure, at the image of the sleek, silent, futuristic car. It looked like something from another planet, a world he no longer belonged to. He slowly placed the receiver back in its cradle. The click was the only sound in his perfect, silent office. He looked out at the city view, but he didn't see it. He saw the faded pencil marks on the doorframe of his childhood home. He saw the swing set his father had built in the backyard. He saw the rose bushes his mother tended with such care. He had been so focused on getting his cut from selling the house that he never stopped to consider what it would mean to actually lose it. He picked up his cell phone, his thumb hovering over Chloe's name. What could he even say? He typed a short, brutal text. It's gone. The bank took the house. The illusion was shattered. The safety net he had taken for granted his entire life had been ripped away. They had lost their childhood home, their inheritance, and their last connection to a past they had been all too willing to sell for pennies on the dollar. Weeks turned into a month. A month of bitter, recriminating phone calls and the grim, logistical nightmare of dealing with a foreclosure. The bank had changed the locks. The house, with all its memories and all my earthly possessions, was gone, set to be auctioned off to strangers. My children were adrift, their safety net gone, their plans in ashes. Mark didn't get his Tesla. His career was stalling, his reputation tarnished by the very public failure of his own family's finances. Chloe's life had fared no better. The Bali retreat, of course, never happened. Her downline in the wellness MLM, sensing weakness and a distinct lack of abundance, had started to abandon her for the next charismatic leader with a better-looking Instagram feed. She spent most of her days now in her small, generic apartment, scrolling endlessly through her phone. It was a nervous, twitchy habit. She'd scroll past photos of smiling families on vacation, past other MLM sellers flaunting their laptop lifestyle from tropical beaches, past the very life she had been so sure was just around the corner. She'd pause occasionally to post something of her own, a filtered photo of a green smoothie with an inspiring caption about trusting the process, or a picture of her cat with the hashtag self-care. It was a flimsy digital curtain she was trying to pull over the gaping hole in her life. It was during one of these aimless scrolling sessions that she saw it. A friend from college had shared a link from the state university's news page. Chloe almost scrolled right past it, another boring alumni update, but the photograph stopped her thumb dead in its tracks. It was our mother, but it wasn't the mother she knew. It wasn't the tired, quiet woman in a faded cardigan. This was Dr. Evelyn Reed. She stood on a stage, confidently shaking hands with the university president. She was wearing a sharp, tailored blazer, her hair was styled, and she looked vibrant, powerful, and at least 10 years younger. The headline above the photo was a gut punch. Alumna Dr. Evelyn Reed establishes $2 million Second Act grant for women in geosciences after remarkable mineral discovery. Chloe's phone slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers and clattered onto the floor. She scrambled to pick it up, her heart pounding a frantic, panicked rhythm against her ribs. She read the article, her eyes flying across the words, each sentence a new, more impossible revelation. It was all there. The article described the extraordinarily high-grade neodymium deposit she had discovered decades ago in the Dakota Badlands. It detailed how she had recently brought the samples to the university's lab for a new analysis, leading to a frenzied but quiet bidding war among several international tech and green energy corporations for the mineral rights to the claim she had meticulously filed and maintained for 40 years. The article didn't mention a specific sale price, only that it was a transformative, multi-million-dollar acquisition, and then came the part that made Chloe feel like she couldn't breathe. It described the creation of a new, landmark endowment, the Evelyn Reed Grant, a $2 million fund dedicated to helping women over 50, women like her mother, return to the field of science after their careers had been derailed by family obligations. And then, there was the quote, the final devastating quote from our mother herself, printed below her smiling, triumphant picture. I was reminded recently that it's never too late to invest in something you believe in. The article quoted Dr. Reed as saying, for years I invested in my family. Now I'm investing in the future. Chloe stared at the screen, at her mother's face, at the words that were so clearly meant for her and her brother. The phone screen was a portal into a different universe, a world where their mother was not a problem to be managed, but a brilliant, wealthy, and celebrated philanthropist. The bunch of old rocks they had dismissed as junk, the memories they had agreed to sell for $5,000, had been a lottery ticket, a winning lottery ticket worth millions. And they hadn't just thrown it away. They had handed it back to the one person who knew its true value. She thought of the foreclosure, the angry phone calls, the lost Bali trip. It was all so pathetic, so small. In the face of this, it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about the crushing, humiliating realization that they had never known their own mother. They had seen a tired old woman in a basement full of clutter. The rest of the world was about to see a titan,